Women pursue their own happiness at the expense of their family, which is why 70-80% of divorces are filed by women. They're not happy anymore. He's not making me happy, which is a fallacy. So what they do is they plan and plot and prepare their divorce. Now, they've been ready for this divorce from the time they were dating you. They were planning it all along. They were sizing you up from the get-go.
David, thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's been a long time coming. We tried to make this work earlier in the week, but having technical difficulties.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, I think the topic of divorce and family law, and specifically as it relates to dads because of the movement that we have here, I've talked with so many men who feel like they either don't know their rights, and that's probably a bit of ignorance when it comes to divorce and custody and alimony and child support, or it seems like in a lot of cases they willingly give up some of those rights. Would you say there's a percentage of one or the other? Is it both? What does that look like from your perspective as an attorney?
I think a lot of men don't have any idea what they're getting themselves into when they get married. So they don't actually know what their rights are. They pretty much are under the impression like their job is show up reasonably sober, say I do, we're done. And that's generally not enough because women tend to go into these relationships with a much greater understanding of what marriage actually means for them. They have a real deeper, thorough conversation with each other about this. So I think most men don't know what they're doing when they're going into marriage is one part of it. And the other part of it is I certainly see a large number of my clients get to the point where they're just emotionally burned out. It's so draining. They can't handle the emotional manipulation. They can't handle the torture. They just are like, I don't care. Just give her whatever she wants. Get me out. I just want to be done. And it's like, that is why women do so much better in divorce courts than men. They handle the emotional discomfort of conflict so much better than men do. And that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to educate more men on A, what your rights are, and B, provide a community for them to actually get the support they need to go through that process, which, as you know, I'm sure dealt with more than enough men who are in the middle of divorces. They're an emotional roller coaster. They're going from I don't care, I'm done, to devastated, depressed. And they need support.
It's interesting that you said that women tend to handle, in your experience, the emotional psychological side of divorce better than men. What do you attribute that to? Does it have to do with women generally having a greater support system or men being isolated? Like, what would that be attributed to?
100%. It's the women talking to each other about what's going on in their life. You know, women are loquacious. They talk about everything endlessly. And men are laconic. Men are like, I'm fine. It's good. No problem. And they don't talk to each other about this stuff, and they need to, because the truth of the matter is men can't talk to women about this stuff. It changes their perception of who you are as a man. And men can and should talk to other men about this stuff. Because in my experience of what I've seen over 27 years is that when a man opens up to another man about what's really going on, he's not met with belittling, demeaning, badgering. He's met with compassion, understanding, and care. And the reality is that when more men open up about this stuff, more men will be able to open up about this stuff. It's an increasing spiral.
Well, and part of the reason in my experience that's the case is because when a man decides that he's going to go first and share what's on his mind or share a difficult, challenging circumstance like navigating a divorce, in a way, it gives other men in his circle permission to do the same thing. And that's what I found, that when I open up about the struggles 100%. I have, other guys are just more comfortable with sharing the struggles that they have.
100%. It's leadership at its most vulnerable. And the truth of the matter is, you know, if you've watched Brene Brown and seen her TED Talks, we all know that vulnerability is the way to connection. And vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is actually strength. The same way that Courage is not being fearless. Courage, you actually have to have fear because you have to actually act in spite of the fear to be courageous. Because if it's a fearless act, what's the courage in that? There isn't any. The same thing with being open and honest and a leader. Who are the most effective leaders? The ones who are able to make an emotional connection and spur action as a result of that. So when a man opens up and becomes more vulnerable with the men in his life, he's actually acting as a leader and he's allowing them space to now share what's going on with them.
I'm glad you threw that extra little thing in there because I know you listen to the podcast and you've been a follower for some time, and enough guys have been around long enough that they know I cringe a little bit when I hear the word vulnerability, because I think most people think that vulnerability isn't the end in and of itself. And what you just said is not only is it a way to connection, I agree with that, but a way to spur action. And I think that's the conversation that most people leave out. And they believe that, oh, if I just share my feelings, then people are going to be connected with me. And I haven't found that to be true. I don't think that's a healthy practice. I think more healthy is, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what I'm going to do about it. What ideas do you have for me? I'm going to implement those things, and I'm going to be better because I'm willing to share where I might be struggling, not just because I'm struggling alone.
Precisely. It's sort of the difference between like spinning your wheels in the mud or throwing in some rocks in there so you can actually get a grip and then take action. And the rocks in this scenario are feedback from other men about, I've been through it. Here's the mistakes I made. Here's what I would do differently. Here's how I see you being able to act and move forward. And you can only get that if somebody's actually opened up and been vulnerable. If you actually know what's going on. The biggest mistake that I have seen in my practice is when people withhold information from me, it always bites them in the butt. I have been in court and a guy has not told me about one of his, let's say, bad behaviors, and that's what's going to come. She knows about it, and it's going to come out in the middle of an argument in front of a judge. I'm going to get blindsided, and then I look like an idiot. My client looks like a scumbag. She looks like a saint. If I know about bad things beforehand, I can get out in front of it. I can get it out there first, and then I'm being honest and open and vulnerable to the judge. And it's like, oh, you're forthright. I get it. You're just being human. It's no big deal. Fine. But it's when I don't know about stuff. And it's the same thing. If you're holding all of your information to yourself, you're not able to deal with it properly.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. I do want to go back to something you said. Maybe we can start from the beginning. You said that women generally have a better idea of what they're getting themselves into when it comes to marriage, and men are less likely to understand the ramifications, a lot of ignorance. This isn't something that men plan for the same way women do when they're little girls about getting married to Prince Charming. It's not a thought that we have like women do for potentially decades. So what is it that a man needs to know when he's getting into essentially a contract, if we're talking about a marriage, that he needs to be aware of as he moves into this? And then we'll work through that and talk about what he needs to know on the tail end, potentially, of a divorce.
Every marriage is a contract. It's called the marriage contract. And you are now tied to that person financially, emotionally, spiritually. And if you don't understand the economic impact of that, it's going to come back and bite you in the butt. Most men think, oh, I'm just going to be a good provider. I'll get married. She'll be the stay-at-home mom. We're going to have this lovely house. It's going to be a fabulous experience. Our 2 to 10 kids are going to get raised. Everything's going to be wonderful. And we'll spend our latter years on a front porch in rocking chairs, remembering all the wonderful times. Very romantic view. Men are very romantic. Women, it's a business deal. They're sizing you up like a lion sizes up a gazelle on the plane. Think about it. When they're dating, what are they doing? They're analyzing, what's your earning capacity? How stable are you? What's your future look like? You're a project. How am I going to fix him? How am I going to change him? What am I going to do to get him better? I don't like his friends. I'm going to find better friends. We're going to renegotiate who his social life is. They're looking at this from a very different perspective because they understand they have a very limited marketability. As soon as that marketability is taken off the market, they're now damaged goods. So they have to sell for the highest amount on the open market. They have to find the best man possible that they can catch. They're very aware of what your earning capacity is going to be because that's going to directly relate to whether or not they have to work. How are you going to provide for our children? How are you going to buy a house for me? Men don't think about those things. Men barely these days even think like, does she have any marriage skills? What does she actually bring into the table? Is she kind, nurturing, loving, stable? Can she cook? I mean, I know that that's like a very patriarchal 1950s question to be asking, but in the world of economics, it's a factor. I have families who spend way too much money on Uber Eats, eating out, because nobody knows how to cook. Well, if you have a family, you've got to have the basic economics of a household down. It's going to impact your future. Well, if you have a marriage and you've been paying for everything through Uber Eats and DoorDashing and going to restaurants, when you get into a divorce situation, that's going to be a factor. What's the lifestyle you guys have been living? Because that's going to impact your child support and your alimony. All of those are things women are taking into consideration that men don't. And it's something that men need to be more aware of. And everybody likes to say, oh, you should get a prenuptial and protect yourself. You have a prenuptial. It's called the family code. It's already been decided for you. You're signing up when you get married to use the family code as your prenuptial agreement if you don't negotiate it beforehand. And that's not a very good code for men because it says half of what you earn is hers, half of what you own is hers. Unless it came in before marriage, it's hers. And men need to be aware of what they're actually signing up for.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found to be interesting is that this family code that you're talking about, where men will give up half of the wealth that they've amassed together. And I think you can make a case for that, but the issue that I take is that what does the man get out of the relationship? What's the 50% of the relationship that he gets from his ex-wife? So the man's expected to give up this, but I don't feel like in a lot of cases he's going to get anything in exchange for the 50% of their wealth they have to give up. Does that make sense?
100%. And the argument would be that what he's getting is the continued parenting and raising of his children through child support, through her availability to be there for daycare and shuttling the kids to school and continue to do that you're essentially buying an employee to take care of your children. And that's the deal. Okay, I get that. That's certainly fair in some ways, but it's also not very fair because there's no expectation that she's going to actually go out, change her lifestyle, get a job, and then share the children equally. And that's what I'm working to change. Because if women want equality, equality also means you need to go out and get a job and you need to contribute equally or to the best of your ability to those children also.
I mean, isn't that built into the equation, into the factor? So, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know state law is different based on whatever state you might be in, but the way that I understand it is that even if there's a woman who, let's say, for the past 20 years has been a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker, in the case of divorce, a court will take into consideration that she does have earning potential, and that will be factored into calculations for, in this case, spousal support. Am I correct in that?
You are correct. It's factored in. But the question is also, what kind of efforts is she really doing to become self-supporting? Because after a 20-year marriage, okay, your kids are most likely no longer toddlers. Right. They no longer need to have you around 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day. What have you done to better yourself? Get a marketable skill. Go get a part-time job that leads to a full-time job. What are you doing to apply for a college degree? What are you doing to improve yourself so that at some point in the future, you are actually self-sufficient? That's where a lot of people fall down. A lot of men make the mistake of not encouraging their wives during the marriage to have a job, to better themselves, to build a business for themselves. And then on the tail end of a divorce, they're going, why is it that I'm the one that has to do all the work? Why does she get to stay at home? Well, you built a stay-at-home mom and you didn't turn her into a stay-at-home mom who's also self-sufficient.
That's the life you created.
Precisely.
Right.
And that's the mistake many men make because they think, well, I'm going to be fair and then she'll treat me fair. And that's not the reality.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I want to go back to this idea of hypergamy, which is what you were sharing earlier. You know, the idea that women are looking to marry up or at least marry for potential when it comes to provision, essentially. And I think that's common knowledge. I can't imagine that there's too many people who, if they look at it objectively, would debate and argue that. I think the issue comes down to it feels cold. And I'm sure you're familiar with Orion Taraban. I had him on the podcast not too long ago, and he has a book called The Value of Others. Are you familiar with his work?
I'm not, actually.
Oh, it's interesting because some of the conversations that you shared echo a lot of the same sentiments. I think you'd be interested in it. But he talks about what he calls the sexual marketplace. And the sexual marketplace is where these transactions take place. So, for example, a woman might be interested in financial acumen because that's how she measures a potential lifelong partner. So if that's the case, I want to ask you, what is a man looking for in a woman? Because if a woman is interested in hypergamy, it's safe to assume that men are also looking for something out of the relationship. And if they're not, my next question is, what should they be looking for in order to ensure that there is a exchange of value, to put it coldly, in the marriage?
So I think most men don't actually plot and plan their partnering. I think a lot of times they just go straight off pure hormones of she's attractive, got a nice body, got a nice smile, treats me nice, this is good enough. And they don't actually do the next phase of what they should be looking for of what's her relationship with her father, because that's going to get replicated in our marriage. How does she expect other people to treat her? What are her long-term relationships? If a woman doesn't have long-term friendships, there's a problem. If she can't say, I've known somebody since high school, you're probably running into someone who's got some personality issues. They're probably a little bit too entitled. They're probably a little bit too dismissive. They don't know how to make long-term connections. I learned that lesson a long time ago by a bad business deal, and it's one of the tools I use to judge people. I evaluate someone by who is your longest friendship? Because that tells me your ability to maintain a long-term relationship. My longest friendship, we go all the way back to diapers. I like to say we were in diapers together. Not the same diaper, thankfully. But that tells you who I am as a person. My law partner I'd known since 1992. We met second day of law school and have been friends and partners essentially since then. That tells you what I'm like as a person. I'm very stable. I've got the ability to make taking commitments. I can show up. I can be in a relationship. I can handle conflict. Trust me, 32 years with somebody has not always been a bed of roses. There's moments where I'm like, I'm ready to just jettison this guy. And then I'm like, wait a second, what does he bring to the relationship? What do I bring to the relationship? And men need to do that when they're looking for marriage, when they're looking for someone to build a partnership with. Because marriage is not about that first 2 years of honeymoon. That's going to fade really quickly if you're looking for a long-term relationship. The 2 years of screwing like rabbits and everything's wonderful and it's also just delicious. You introduce children to that and bills and home repairs and day-to-day life, all of a sudden, you've got to be able to have somebody who's much more stable. You better be evaluating somebody for the long term if you're going to be getting married.
Those are really powerful questions. And I agree. I wish more men did that. And if they did, I think we'd have less catastrophe and maybe you'd have less work. So I'm not sure that would be good for you, but it would be an interesting experiment. I am curious, though, as we move into a marriage, because a lot of the guys that I work with and that listen to this podcast, they're already married. They've already made that decision. For better or worse, they've made their decision. And now with your experience, even if it's just anecdotally, are there some things that you see happening between husband and wife that are predictors of leading to divorce or predictors of staying faithful and loyal and committed to each other?
Biggest predictor of divorce is, do you guys have the same last name? Second
Really?
biggest predictor is, how do you handle money? Yes. Couples where she has her own last name, she's already halfway out the relationship.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Or vice versa. Vice versa. That oldest friend of mine, he didn't like his last name. She didn't like her last name. They went and found a different last name for both of them to change to. They found a name that they both liked. And that became their family. But to me, that's an element of commitment to the relationship of, we're building something for the long term. That's important. How do you handle money? Money is a big issue because most of the time, that's where people fight over. There's a conflict about how money is being handled. The other big one, and this is one where I think many, many, many men make a huge mistake. They let her dictate his social life entirely. All of a sudden, he's no longer seeing his best friend from high school. All of a sudden, his best buddy from work, I'm too busy, can't do it. She's making comments about, I don't like that guy. He's a loser. He doesn't dress well. He's rude. He's mean to me. And she's isolating you from your friends in your network. And then all you're doing is socializing only with her friends because she's the one driving the social calendar. That's a problem. And the reason why that's a problem is because she's now leading in the relationship and you're not. And your life isn't good. And then you're going to become unhappy. And then that's going to bleed into the relationship. And you're not actually bringing anything new to the relationship because you have no new experiences without her. You have to have independent fun and friends in order to keep your primary relationship active and alive. I'm not saying exclusively, but you need to have some fresh blood that's coming into the relationship. You know, you go hunting. I imagine that that's a big factor in you going away for, I'm assuming, a weekend or a week of hunting, and you come back, you feel more alive, you're more energized, you've dumped a lot of stress, you've got new experiences to share with you, whoever your partner is. This was a great thing. It was really funny when Joey did that. This was a really fun moment. This was a really exciting moment. Oh, I can't believe I blew it there. You bringing new energy to the relationship. But if you spend your entire relationship with somebody and they're with you for all of those same moments, what are you guys talking about? You have to have something new going on. So I think those are the three big things.
I was just going to say, it's such an interesting point that, and it's a bit ironic. I see where women might isolate their men. Like, I don't like this. I used to play pickup basketball every Tuesday night. And we had a group of guys. We'd go to the local church. They had a basketball court inside the church, and we'd go play basketball on Tuesday nights. And there were a couple of friends who, without fail, we'd call them, we'd message them, hey, come play basketball. They'd say, oh, I need to check with my wife first. And look, I understand coordinating with your wife. I think you should coordinate things with your wife. But you don't need to check with her as to whether or not you can go play basketball with your friends. Just coordinate it. Let her know ahead of time. Hey, babe, Tuesday nights are for me and the boys. You know, I can help you with dinner. I can help around the house. I can help put little Joey to bed. And then that evening, I'm going to go play basketball unless it conflicts with something. So it is interesting. So I've seen where women dictate that, but I've also seen men do it to themselves. And I think in a lot of cases, it's noble. They'll say things like, oh, I'd love to go hunting, but I have to work on this project around the house. Or I'd love to play basketball, but my wife really needs me here because fill in the blank. And it's noble in a lot of ways, but it's ironic because if you don't do it, to your point, it is, and this is what's crazy when women do this, is because it's going to blow up the relationship if she does not encourage him to go out and do his own things in his own way, independent of their relationship. You guys can come back together, but you both need things to do on your own.
Absolutely. I think it cuts both ways. I just think women tend to do more of that. And men do the sacrifice thing. I'm going to sacrifice my friendship because I got to paint the garage. I got to sacrifice playing basketball tonight because I've got to do something around the house. No, you don't. It's 2 hours. If something is that important and it's a real crisis, call a plumber. Call the electrician. You're not handling it. Because if it's just a general, like, oh, I got to paint the garage, let it wait till Sunday, have the kids do it. Hire the neighborhood teenager. Find a way to outsource it and put the priority on what makes you a really active and engaged partner. Because that's what's going to be important for you in the long run.
I think before I interrupted you there a minute ago, you were going to get into something else. So you gave me 3 predictors of what's going to help a marriage, but it seems like you had more to say before I jumped in with that thought.
Well, I've always got more to say because I think that one of the big things for couples is to remember that you should be looking for the long term. You should be building for the long haul, and it's not always going to be easy and fun. There's times where you have to actually slog through things, and that's one of the problems I see today with a lot of women is they're chasing their own happiness. And they're willing to sacrifice the unity of their family for it. Whereas men are willing to sacrifice their happiness for the unity of their family. And I think that there's lessons to be learned from both of them. She needs to do less of self stuff. He needs to do more of it. She needs to do more sacrifice for the family. I know that would not play well with a mostly female audience, but it's the truth. And I think men need to be a little bit more selfish. There needs to be more balance in a relationship. Because otherwise, you're going to end up in divorce court or custody court one way or another, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, and I think it is, to your point earlier, about finding the type of woman who has the type of dreams that you do, the one who does want to build a family, that does want to grow together, that isn't as selfish as maybe you see. I mean, clearly not every woman is like that, obviously, but I do imagine that with the way that cultural conditioning has existed and evolved over the past 50 to 60 years, that you see more and more of that. You see women who are not women and men not getting married as early. You see plenty of women who are not interested in having children and they go chase their career for happiness. And then at the end of that career, as that career winds down or they're at the end of their good years for having children, there's a lot of regret that these women have. And I feel for them because in a lot of ways, they've been conditioned to believe that pursuing their own happiness is going to lead to something wonderful. And we see it time and time again where so many women are upset that they didn't create the family and they didn't go all in on having children and being there and building the family the way that they are biologically designed to do.
100%. And there's two entities that I blame for that. On the one hand, it's the feminist lobby. I think they've done women a huge disservice by telling them you can have it all. You can't have it all. No one can. It's not possible to have a fabulous career, be super successful, be a feminine mom, stay-at-home mom, perfect mother, take care of the kids. You can't do it all. Like the Virginia Slims out of the 70s and 80s was nice, but it's also false. And on the other end of the spectrum, I blame Disney. Because I think Disney sells women this idea that you're a princess and you're going to go find a prince and he's going to give you what you want. You're going to be happily ever after. No, I'm sorry. Life does not work that way. Those are two ends of a spectrum, and the vast bulk of reality is in the middle. Life is dirty. It's messy. It's not always comfortable. And if you're going to build a partnership with somebody, you've got to be in it for the long haul. And you have to find somebody who's in it for the long haul, not just sizing you up for the next meal.
It's really interesting that you would bring up Disney. My girlfriend and I were just talking about this a day or two ago, that with the way that culture is, and especially when it comes to dating, it's very easy to discard somebody because they're not perfect, right? They don't have everything that you could possibly want. They're great in all the right ways, but they have a few things that don't sit well or that are kind of bothersome, and then people are just discarded. We become such a commodity, especially with dating apps and things like that. And then what ends up happening is you throw away somebody who could have been a very good fit for you because they had a few things that you didn't like but you could live with, because you assumed, to your point about Disney, that Prince Charming is out there and one day you're going to live happily ever after and it's going to be exactly perfect all the time what you want, and that is not reality, and that's going to be a bad day if you think that's going to happen.
100%. 100%. And it's, for me, I just see it. I mean, I live in the bubble of Los Angeles where everybody is like looking for perfection all the time. So that's what I'm very much attuned to. And all I see is people who are getting more and more miserable. You know, what I'm seeing in the women around me is they have these unrealistic expectations. You know, it's the famous, give me the 6 6s, 6 feet, 6 figures, 6 inches, something or else. And you're talking about like 1% of the population. That's just not realistic. I know guys who are amazing men. They are fabulous fathers. They are good providers. They have one major flaw. They are under 5'5". They can't even get a date on a dating app because they're too short. And I'm like, and I have a friend. She's about 5'11", 6 foot-ish. She would never date him because he's too short. Now, the fact that he's highly successful as a lawyer, great personality, very nice, very stable, perfect personality to like have a long-term relationship with, none of that matters because he's too short. Okay, well, you're the one who's going to be unhappy and alone and have 3 cats.
Well, I mean, to be fair, men have our preferences too, right? I wouldn't date a woman who's 100 pounds overweight, even if she was a great mother or had, nurturing instincts and was a great supporter and encourager of me, right? So,
Ryan, 100%. And I'm going to stop you because there's one major difference. Does she have control over that 100 pounds?
Sure, right. All I'm saying, of course,
can she put the fork down and hit the gym?
Yeah.
There's nothing he can do to change his height. And that's where it's like, are you judging someone based off of fair criteria? Something that they don't have control over, not necessarily a fair thing to judge somebody on. Something they can control tells you who they are as a person.
I do think it's fair. I think it's fair to make all sorts of assessments on who you would like to date and who you wouldn't on both sides of the table. Maybe one guy doesn't like brunettes and he only dates blondes, and because that's his preference, or eye color, or body type, or name it. I hear this argument a lot, and what I would say is that for a guy that's 5'5", like you're talking about, it's the hand we were dealt, and I think if we get wrapped up into that, it becomes an issue because I've seen so many guys get bitter and resentful over it, and then they end up shooting themselves in the foot or losing confidence or not giving them an opportunity to actually get into the dating space.
I mean, I hear you. Certainly, I mean, I'm a gay man in Los Angeles. Of course, I'm got lots of choices, and I can be as picky as everybody else when I want to be. But the reality is that I think there's things that you have to actually judge people on that are valid and are going to have long-term value in a relationship, and things that are superficial and that can change. My friend Anne, this month she's a strawberry brunette. Next month she could be a very dark-haired person, and the month after that she could go blonde, and the month after that she may shave her head just because it's hot. Judging somebody based on something like that's very changeable, like hair color, I think you might want to dig a little deeper on.
I think where we might land in some agreement is that there's indexing, right? And so we all index certain things more valuable than others. And I agree with what you're saying, that if a man has the ability to be a great provider, maybe he's loyal, maybe he's knowledgeable, he's intelligent, maybe he's kind and empathetic, whatever, pick your virtue. Those things should have a higher index. Those should be prioritized. I would agree with that. I just am careful of getting into the debate about not villainizing necessarily, but making it seem as if people are immoral if they have personal preferences in the way people look. And I don't think that's the case. I think everybody has preferences, and that's entirely legitimate.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's a morality issue. I think it's very much are you going to use that as an excuse for why you can't get what you want issue?
That's fair. I will definitely agree with you on that. Yeah.
You're making your bed and then complaining about it. Well, sorry. Like, that's what you signed up for.
Yeah. I can get behind that for sure.
I'm very much about the taking responsibility.
And that's one thing I agree with, right? So if you're making decisions and it's not working out for you, and you know that you're making poor decisions, at some point you relinquish your right to complain about the situation you're in because you made the decisions that got you to the position you're in. So make different decisions.
Yeah.
I want to pivot into the dreaded moment when there's, you hear the words, I'm not in love with you anymore, or I want a divorce or a separation. I'm assuming based on what I've seen that women initiate divorce at a significantly higher rate than when men do. So I want to talk about that. When a man hears those words or faces and confronts that situation, what is his game plan? What is his first course of action, and what should he be thinking about as he potentially is moving through these divorce proceedings now?
So as I said earlier, women pursue their own happiness at the expense of their family, which is why 70-80% of divorces are filed by women. They're not happy anymore. He's not making me happy, which is a fallacy. So what they do is they plan and plot and prepare their divorce. Now, they've been ready for this divorce from the time they were dating you. They were planning it all along. They were sizing you up from the get-go. And so now what's happened is over the last 2 years, generally, they've met with 2 to 4 different lawyers to educate themselves about what they can expect in a divorce and how to prepare for that, how to make sure that their credit card bills are paid down so that any family debt falls on him. Now, she may be financially responsible for it in the divorce. She may have to, in theory, pay back half of that. But the reality is she's coming into a divorce with 0 credit, debt, and that's going to impact her ability to go either refinance a home, get a new apartment, puts her in a better financial position. She's going to have thought about, how do I want to position myself work-wise? Either do I want to not take a promotion so I have a lower income, or do I want to not work at all so that he has to continue to support me once we're post-divorce? So when she's actually made that decision, she's plotted it out, everything's been prepared, he's going to get blindsided. Now, he can get blindsided softly, and by that I mean, I want a divorce, you need to move out, and that's what happens. Or he can get blindsided with a 2x4, and that's the domestic violence restraining order. That is, you're abusive, you're harassing me, I can't take this anymore, go to court, get a restraining order, kick you out of your house, take your kids, get primary custody of the house, get sole custody of the children, take all the money. You're now living in your truck as a man, and you're figuring, what did I do wrong? And the comment I hear all the time is, I never hit her. I don't know why this is happening. It's happening because it's a strategy move. And it's happening because in today's environment, we're not looking at physical violence as the definition necessary for a domestic violence restraining order. We're at the point now where it's domestic abuse. And I'm going to say something here that most people are going to be like, "That I can't believe you said that." Women are more abusive than men. Men are more violent than women. And by that I mean this. Abuse is nagging, harassing, demeaning behavior, disturbing your peaceful enjoyment of your house, breaking your ego, breaking your spirit. Violence is breaking a bone, throwing a glass against a wall, breaking a chair, hurting somebody, bruising them. In general, women tend to use their words and they break men's spirits. To me, that is more abusive. When men get violent, it's a temporary thing. The reality is this. If you and I are in a fight, Ryan, you're bigger than me, you're going to break my arm, break a couple ribs. Truth is this. 6, 8, 10 weeks down the road, my arm, my ribs, they're going to have healed. I'm moving on. I'm good. You destroy my spirit. You break my ego. You take my self-esteem from me. I may never recover from that. Who did more damage?
Well, I need to jump in on this one because I don't agree with that. I don't agree that violence towards another person is temporary, especially if it's somebody that you trust, that trusts you. That violence, if you hit a woman, for example, and she's under your care as your wife, that has long-term emotional and psychological damage associated with it. So I want to be really clear that I don't believe that being violent towards your wife is just a temporary thing, like her bruise will heal or her arm will heal itself. That, yes, sure. But also there are long-term psychological ramifications. So I don't think that's a really fair representation of what that is.
Okay, I agree with you that there are definitely psychological damages on top of the physical. But when we're talking about this in the sphere of law and society, we don't even address female abuse on men. That's not even a factor in the conversation. All we ever want to talk about is the physical violence. Men are more violent. He breaks things. Okay, I get that. But let's talk, if you want to then say there's psychological damage, then let's talk about psychological damage on both ends. And the reason
totally
why
agree.
that's important is because in the world of family law, these domestic violence restraining orders are destroying families. They're destroying dads and their children's relationships. They're making men suicidal at an incredible rate. They're destroying them financially, emotionally, and frequently these are guys who are ready to just check out because they've been so financially destroyed. They don't know what to do. They don't know why they did what they did wrong. They don't understand it. They don't understand how they got in this position. And it's just a very summary decision made by a judge on literally whatever somebody wants to write in a declaration, because the level of proof is preponderance of evidence. It's the lowest level. It's 50.1%. Is it more likely than not? So I go into court and I say, Your Honor, I need a protection order from Ryan. He yells at me. He's abusive to me. Okay. That's all it takes. It's literally all it takes.
How does the court, though, decipher between there's legitimate claims, right? There's on both sides. I think you can say that there's
100%.
legitimacy to some of these allegations. So, and there's ones that aren't legitimate.
Absolutely.
So how does a court decipher between the two? You know, and I even think, to go back to the violence conversation, you know, a court ought to take in the psychological turmoil on both sides, but especially with regards to violence. It's got to be a scary thing to live with an individual who you're afraid of, that they might hurt you or your children. And so there's that toil as well. And it might just be threat of violence, let alone not violence in and of itself. So how does the court actually weigh this and decipher between what is legitimate and what is not?
95% of the time, they don't. You've got judges who are looking at the situation and they have the decision to make. And remember, this is all done in the light of the O.J. Simpson murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. I think he actually did it. That's my opinion. We're moving on. That was a seminal moment in our society. It changed our perception. And what that actually did for judges was tell them, you need to cover your butt. You need to protect the victim, the alleged victim, at all times. And so when a person goes into court and says, I'm the victim, if you're the judge, what are you going to do? Are you going to really spend a whole lot of time trying to delve into figuring out, like, is it really that? Or are they just making things up? Are they stretching the truth? Do I really want to protect the dad in this? She's saying he's abusive. She's saying she's scared of him. Whether she is or isn't, do I want to be the one who maybe it's real and I didn't issue the restraining order and then something actually happened? Do I want that on my record? Let alone my conscience, just my record. No. They're predisposed to CYA And so as a consequence, when you've got an incredibly low standard of proof necessary, and you've got an environment where judges are concerned about their own reputation, it's very easy for someone to go into court and just get one of these restraining orders that destroys people. And men don't do that. I had 2 conversations last week with 2 different guys, back-to-back days. Both men are being extremely abused by their spouses. There is extreme emotional abuse going on. Both of them are demonstrating profound PTSD in my presence. I'm seeing exactly how much PTSD they are suffering from the relationship, not from war, not from ex-military. Neither of them were in the military. And I'm telling them, you need to go into court. We need to draft a restraining order. We have enough information, which I rarely say to men because it's a higher standard in reality. But we have enough. Both of them said the same thing to me. I can't do that. I can't be the first mover. She's the mother of my children. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And it's again, he is sacrificing himself for the happiness of his family. And it's going to bite him in the butt because guaranteed, both of these guys are going to get hit with the restraining order. They're going to lose access to their kids. They're going to lose access to their house. They're going to lose access to their tools, their truck, their personal belongings. They're going to call me up in an absolute terror. They're going to be crying. They're going to say, I can't believe she's doing this. I can't see my kids. You got to fix it. And I'm going to have to tell them there's nothing I can do. I told you what to do. You didn't take my advice. This is the consequences of your non-action. Now we have to move forward. This is the world we're living in and that men are faced with.
You said you're not suggesting that everybody do that.
No, but I am suggesting it for the men who are in that situation. They need to sack up and go do it. And if I don't say that to men and get this message out there, more men are going to get destroyed by these restraining orders. They're going to lose access to their kids. And then they're going to be like, the system's against me. It's a women's court. I can't win. No, you didn't take the shot when you had the opportunity. And now you're wondering why you lost the game. Well, if you're playing hockey and you don't shoot at the goal and the other team does, they're going to win. It's the same thing. If you've got the cards to play, you need to play them.
What would you recommend as standard practice? Because I imagine those cases, maybe I'm wrong, but I imagine those cases are the minority of divorce proceedings. You know, I imagine, you correct me if I'm wrong, that most of it is relatively civil. Not entirely, but relatively amicable. Hey, you know, we got to split the assets. We got to figure out both parties are going to be advocating in their own best interest. Of course, that doesn't mean it's not amicable or civil. But what would you suggest as best practices if a man is in one of those situations where he's not dealing with potential abuse, he's not dealing with a potential domestic order, and it's something that I think would be more common?
So I when I'm talking about those cases, that's the end of the spectrum, the 10 to 15% top end of the divorce cases, high conflict, lots of problems. The vast bulk of family law, 70, 80%, people come to an agreement. They write up an agreement, go to a lawyer, get it tightened up, submit it to a judge. Maybe they're in court one time, possibly twice, and never go back. That's the vast bulk of family law. Then there's this other conflict part where people are in these higher conflict situations. And those are the ones where they absolutely need to be getting a consultation and they need to take action. And if a man is told, here's what you need to do, listen to the person who's telling you. Because I guarantee you, the woman that you are divorcing has met with 2 or 3 or 4 lawyers and she's taking their direction. And if you're in that situation, you need to protect yourself. You wouldn't go into a war zone and not wear a bulletproof vest. Same thing. You need to go in and be protected. And part of that protection is understanding there's times where you have to be the aggressor. And you have to recognize that the woman you married is not the woman you're divorcing. This relationship has profoundly changed. You're in a completely different situation. The dynamic is different. And you can no longer treat that relationship and that woman the way that you did, because that's what got you where you're at.
I've once heard somebody say that once it comes to the point of divorce, it's no longer a marriage. It's now just business decisions. And I think if you look at it like that, at least from where I sit,
100%.
You're going to make much more prudent decisions. You're going to protect yourself. You're going to advocate for yourself more strongly. You're probably going to hire an attorney. I actually do have a question about that. Should everybody hire an attorney when faced with this? Number one. And number two is the question I'm often asked is, should the man leave his house? If she asks him to leave, should he leave? Should he stay? What are the ramifications of both?
So the first question is, should a man hire a lawyer? That's a big question. There's a lot of room there, because are you hiring me for a one-time consultation to be like, here's the situation. What am I looking at for alimony, child support? How do I divide assets? Or are you looking to hire me to be your standard bearer? We're going into battle. I'm going to fight all your battles. So there's a lot of range there. And I think that at a minimum, every man should at least go have a paid consultation with a lawyer to get solid advice about what's really going on. And I say paid for a reason. People only value what they pay for. If you're getting a bunch of free advice on the phone for 20 minutes, you're not giving them the full picture, you're not going to get good advice. You need to go spend some time with somebody and actually see eye to eye, here's the real lay of the land. What are we really facing? Now, to your second question, should a man stay or go? Total coin toss. Completely depends on what's the level of acrimony, what's the level of strategizing that she's doing, because the longer you stay there, the more likely it is you're going to get hit with the domestic violence restraining order, which then gives her sole legal custody, sole physical custody of the kids, kicks you out of the house. Now you're at a disadvantage because you haven't had the opportunity to take your belongings and put them someplace. So it's very much a strategy move. You really have to look at, what are the players here and what's my real end game going to be? And what is her end game? What is she looking to accomplish? If you're not doing analysis of the opposition, if you're not researching what are their best game plans, you're probably going to be at a disadvantage.
Well, David, I know you have some additional resources because there is so much confusion about what is happening. And not only that, I've gone through a divorce, and my divorce was fairly amicable, and we came to our agreements, and that was that. We have the occasional misunderstanding or frustration with each other, but fortunately it's never been too contentious, overly contentious. But I know a lot of guys are dealing with that, and I want them to have the resources they need so they know what to expect. You talk about battle. I've likened it to going to play against another team in football. You always study the game film before you go into that game because you want to know what to expect and what to be prepared for. So you've got some great resources that I want to make sure you have the chance to share because more men need to hear about this stuff.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. I'm sorry you had to go through your divorce, but I'm glad you guys did it as amicably as possible. That's a very important part. And I do. I've got my new book is Dad's Child Custody Action Plan. It's designed for dads who are being forced to go to court to get more time with their kids. And it's available at Amazon. It's available at our website, dadslawschool.com. And at dadslawschool.com, we have an online video course series that teaches dads what to say to the judge to get more time with your kids. Because most men go into court and say, I'm a great dad, I love my kids, I want my 50% custody. And you haven't told the judge anything about who you are as a person. And the judge is hearing that from you, and from mom he's hearing, he's lazy, he's negligent, he doesn't know anything about the kids, he doesn't know their school, their best friend, he doesn't even know their shoe size. And a judge has to make a decision as to who's the better parent. And based on that lack of information from one party and too much information on the other, the judge is going to find against you. So my book, Dad's Child Custody Action Plan, is designed to give dads the tools they need to go into court to fight for their kids. It's very comprehensive in terms of what a judge needs to know about you. We've got a child inventory. It's 123 questions designed to pull the information that you as a father know about your kids so that you can put it in a declaration or an affidavit to the judge so that they can understand who you really are as a man going into this battle for your children. Lots of times people think the first impression they're going to make with the judge is when they walk into court. They'll put on an uncomfortable suit and tie the tie too tight and go into court, and they're trying to make a good impression on the judge. And the reality is, you've already made an impression on the judge. You did it by the papers you filed. The judge has a perception of you based on what they've read about you that you wrote to them. And if you don't put enough information in there, the judge already knows you're not that on top of things. And that's why it's important to write a good, solid declaration. And that's what my book, Dad's Child Custody Action Plan, is about, is to give dads the tools they need so they get the time they want and that their kids deserve.
David, I appreciate that. We'll make sure we sync everything up so they know where to go. And I appreciate you taking your time and sharing some of this because it is important stuff, and I want to make sure men are equipped with the information they need. But before you leave, we're going to move into an exclusive segment for our Iron Council members that have 4 or 5 questions they wanted to ask you specifically about their situation. So here we go. Like I said, I've got 4 or 5 questions. Robbie Leffel, this one's maybe a harder question to ask, but he says, what's the best result you've had in a case involving a high conflict narcissist, and how did you do it? What was the strategy? I know that's super broad, but does anything come to mind there?
Yeah, absolutely. My first comment is generally you got to understand women are not narcissists. In high conflict divorces and child custody battles, they're borderlines. They're not the narcissist. And you deal with those differently. Generally with a borderline, what you're looking to do is box them in. You need to have your agreement as tight as possible, as specific as possible, because they're going to make their own reality. Borderlines create their own reality. They gaslight people masterfully. We say that every accusation they make is actually an admission. So if they're saying that you're lying, you can pretty much be sure that they're lying. And you have to treat borderlines differently because they're going to constantly come at you. I say borderlines are like the honey badgers of humanity. They just don't care. They don't care about reality. They don't care about judges' orders. They don't care. And so as a consequence, you have to be much more assertive, not aggressive, but assertive, not angry, but assertive going into court about what you want and what the truth of the matter is, because the judge is going to hear from that honey badger a lot of stuff, and you're going to have to be able to argue against it.
That's interesting. All right, appreciate that. Let's go to JJ Getzgow. He says, first, thanks for doing this podcast. It's hard for men to go through. This is part of the reason he joined the Iron Council, to strengthen himself and repair his marriage with the love of his life. But since they are getting divorced and going through the mediation process, he has a few questions. So here they are. My father helped us buy the home with our down payment, but she does not want to repay before proceeds are split. Only a verbal agreement to pay back. I would like to honor the repayment. And then secondary is, what do you do when a soon-to-be ex slanders your name in a small community? Should I pursue legal action? I'm trying to keep it simple and not involve lawyers.
So the first part of that, the repayment of the loan, if there's no paperwork showing that it was a loan, you're most likely going to have a very hard battle there. The court's most likely going to look at that and say, well, that was a gift from dad to the two of you. If you want to repay it, you can repay it, but I'm not going to make her repay it. And the second part of it, the slander, that's a very common tactic in family law. And it happens small towns, big towns, doesn't matter. And the truth of the matter is this. You're going to spend a lot of money on a lawyer going after a case that won't hunt. That dog is just nothing there. So for the most part, unless they're actually saying like verifiable slander a la he is a criminal and here's who he stole from, don't even bother going down that road. Just chalk it up to this is the ugliness of divorce, get through it as quickly as possible, take the high road on that and move on. You're just going to frustrate yourself if you try and go after the slander.
I've heard that, and I've heard, defamation I think is a little bit different because there's probably legal terms for these things. We throw these words around like they don't have any meaning, but they do, and there's actual legal terms in place for a reason. And even in defamation, from what I understand, it's very difficult to prove that by somebody saying you're an asshole that you lost revenue. So why are you going to pour more money, chase good money with bad, essentially? And I can see why you would not want to do that.
100%. And so much of what it is its opinion. If I say Ryan Mickler's a jerk, what does that mean?
Right.
it doesn't mean anything, right? Like, okay, that's your opinion. Great. I could probably find 5,000 other guys who say something totally different. So it doesn't have any value. In a small town, it may feel like it does, but in reality, what's going to value is what are your actions? How do people see you? How did you carry yourself through this? That's the important part, because it's also going to impact what you see in the mirror, and it's going to impact the way your kids view you.
And then the last one here comes from Chris Henningsen. He said, is there any chance of eliminating the bias of family courts and the child support system? How would one go about bringing and presenting an alienation case to a California family court? Okay,
so two really big questions there. The first of, how do you eliminate bias? Well, we may actually see that in our lifetime if judges get replaced with artificial intelligence. And I say that with,
interesting.
There was a pilot study done in New York. They used artificial intelligence versus a panel of judges to determine who was most likely to run if they were granted bail. And the judges were all like, I'm a really good judge of character. I can tell when somebody's going to deserve bail or not, if they're going to be a flight risk. And the AI was profoundly more effective and correct in figuring out who was going to actually be a flight risk. Judges' internal bias plays into what they're saying. So when we come to the reality of family law, maybe artificial intelligence may actually help us here. Remains to be seen. Now, a parental alienation case, that's a term that should never, ever, 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 ever under penalty of death be used in a court of law. It's not an actual psychological term. It's a behavior, and if you use it, you're telegraphing to the judge that you're a problem. What you want to talk about is the behavior, the parental interference, the custody interference, the visitation interference. That's the stuff that's going to get you crowned with a judge. Parental alienation is a term never to be used. There's 3 basic levels to parental alienation. There's the first of, we're going through a divorce. This is the 70 to 80% of, all right, we're breaking up. Your mom's being difficult. Your dad's being a jerk. Okay, there's some nasty words there. 6-9 months down the road, that kind of calms down. There's mid-level, 9 to 12 months that's continuing, and eventually that does die down. And then you get to the extreme version of what people really are using for a semi-clinical term of parental alienation. And that's where you're really trying to break the relationship between one parent and the child. You're trying to sever that love. That's what most people don't understand. That's the real meaning of parental alienation from Richard Gardner, and when he wrote about this in the 80s. And if you're really dealing with that stuff, there's a lot of great resources. There's Amy Baker has several books on actual parental alienation. The best attorney in the country is Ashish Joshi out of Michigan. He's a brilliant lawyer when it comes to parental alienation cases because they're very, very difficult for actual alienation. There's great resources. There's a book, Parental Alienation. There's litigating parental alienation. I've got lots of those resources on my website at dadslawschool.com for how to find that stuff. And for the most part, people need to stay away from that term because it's not actually what the situation is. It's actually just conflict that will go away over time.
Man, that's powerful. I really appreciate you doing this extra segment. You're the first person to do this. I've had this idea for a while, and you're the first person to go through it. So I'm going to take that segment with these questions and put that over for my guys in the Iron Council. So I really appreciate you taking a few more minutes to go through that. That means a lot to me.
Brian, that means a lot to me. I've been following you for 10 years now. That's a huge honor. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, this podcast is going to go live on Tuesday of next week. I'm going to do a few things, send this off to my editor this afternoon, get him to clean it up, scrub it up, and make all the links on the page and everything. I'll get you all the details, but this will be live on Tuesday of next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate this. It was great getting to know you.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on. Yeah, likewise. We'll stay in touch.